Good evening, everyone. Thank you to everyone for making the time and effort to join us today. This is the second program that we are having based on the topic of motherhood for today, but we've had three programs already. For those who have joined us and been with us through all of the three programs, I thank you very much for the effort that you have made throughout the day. I'm sure all of you are quite tired, but I know that most of you are quite excited for this talk as well. And I would like to especially welcome the children who are joining us in light of the UK's Mother's Day. And we have a very special guest that I am so glad to introduce to all of you today. A nurse, midwife, nurse practitioner, educator, strategic management, and an award winning advocate for mental health. But I know that the title that she's most proud of is actually being a mother. Welcome, Mina. Thank you for accepting our invitation and being with us today. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for inviting me. You can hear me, I hope. And
Yes,
yes,
loud and clear.
I feel very privileged. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to today's session.
Yes. So today's session thank you, Mina. And today's session is going to be a very relaxed discussion and a very relaxed discussion and more of a reflection about your experiences of both being a child and being a mother, whilst, of course, climbing as much ladders as you have climbed. To give all of you a bit of a background image of what organizing this talk was like, I told Mina to send me a biography so that I could sort of advertise her talk. And she sent me a CV because she was busy and couldn't write a biography. And I was going through her CV and I was like, my gosh, where is this going to end? Because it was pages on pages on pages. So thank you very much, Mina. So as to go into our discussion, you've played many roles in your life. I know that you've also brought up a beautiful son who's absolutely successful in his trade. How was it for you balancing and sort of doing the things that you were able to do and also sort of bringing up a child?
I think for me it was particularly a big struggle because I was a single mother, and at that time, if somebody had told me, Mina, at the end of this, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I would not have believed them. I think the struggle was in a very dark tunnel, trying to manage finances, a mortgage. At the time, I had my son at private school and I couldn't afford the fees. And the bills would come in through the letterbox saying, you owe us 7,000. And no sooner did 2 months go and I had another 7,000. We need more money from you. And I'm thinking, where am I going to get all this money from? And then I think the stress of all that. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to have to be calm about this. And I think looking back at life, I think with sort of having being in that dark tunnel, trying to manage a mortgage, a very demanding job, where you've got thousands of people depending on you, and having a child that you're bringing up and who is suddenly having to deal with the fact that this is only my mum who's my only parent. And the whole thing was just amazingly challenging. um, and I think that I do empathize for, especially in our contemporary society today, that number of women that are just so challenged by the financial constraints, by having to manage themselves, having to manage a child. And I think those demands, I think you're almost asked to be a superwoman.
Hmm.
And I really, my heart goes out to those women. And let us not forget, there are women who have died as a result of the stress and strain. And it's really sad when that happens, because you think, they lost their will to live, not because of anything else, but because the stress, and then they've had cancer as a result. And we all know that one of the triggers of stress is cancer.
Mm.
So, you know, seeing even within my family people who died, it's quite tragic. And you think, my God, the stress of modern society is awful. And, going on to Lord Buddha, and I think for me, the inspiration of what he had to say, and the fact that, when I think of those women who died, I also think of the fact that Mahamaya had to die, and obviously she went off to the Tavatimsa realm, and she was then visited by Buddha later on in her life, and the fact that he was then able to impart Abhidhamma to her,
Mm.
and the fact that yes, his wife was Prajapati, but the fact is that there is so much that we can gain spiritually in our journey through our life, because we have to realize that women have died in childbirth, and having been a midwife as well, luckily I've never seen that. I've seen almost a woman dying, but I've never actually experienced a death of a woman. But nowadays I've seen so much mortality between the sort of problems that happen where women do die in childbirth, and it's quite upsetting and it's quite shocking. And and so I think on this Mother's Day, I just want to acknowledge that the gratitude that a lot of women are still living despite all those challenges of bringing up a child, especially if they're on their own. It's
Mm.
pretty hard. And I just wanted to acknowledge those women who passed away, and and hope that they're all in the Tamisa realm, and hopefully they're all happier than they were in this world here.
I mean, it is, I think, being a monk and looking back at having this practice, which is mostly reflective, and looking back and then thinking, seeing devotees have children, seeing how these children are with the devotees, and of course judging them sometimes, and then judging myself and thinking, my gosh, my mother had to go through me, didn't she? It is an enormous, and I honestly, Mina, and this is something that I think to myself a lot. Seeing mothers, seeing parents do this, I don't think I can, you know, and honestly, I think it is the most difficult task. I can be without food. I have done so. I can meditate in the forest. I can be without luxuries. I have done so. But the fact of being a parent, to me, I feel like, oh my gosh. So taking this opportunity to just be grateful to all the mothers, all the mothers. So Mina, tell us a bit more about, I know, through the difficulties and through your CV, I know that you were not a woman who gave things up. Surely not. You are a powerhouse. And I know working with you, Meena and I are on similar projects. So, working with you, Meena is an extremely talented woman and for sure an expert at what she does. You are not a woman who gave anything up in terms of her career. How did you manage? What drove you in this sort of challenge?
I think the fact is that when you're at the lowest point in your life, you either sink or you swim. And I think it's a sort of an analogy that people say, but actually when you're there, you've got to do it. You've got to work through it. And I remember sort of, even as taking my son to university with me, sitting him down in the lecture hall, and telling him, shh, 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 be quiet, and he's wanting to draw pictures. And I think it was all quite extraordinary because, when he was a little boy, I used to put him in the creche and go and do my degree. I was at the London School of Economics, and I had a fantastic, creche for children.
Mm.
And it's really quite funny because when I graduated from that university, and then my son graduated from the same university, And I remember going to his graduation, and he had just completed his master's, and he had got this distinction in master's. And
Mm.
I was saying to his friends, I said, my son started at the age of 4. And they said, oh, this was he a genius child? I said, no, 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 no. I put him in the nursery, placed him in the nursery, and I was at the same university.
Mm.
But it was great because, when he graduated and I was able to wear the same gown, and we took our photographs together.
Mm.
But you never see that when you're in that dark tunnel at an earlier age, when you're struggling. You don't see any of that. You just think, I'm never going to see the end of this.
Mm.
But I think I was very, very fortunate that I had a son who had a very good psychological type of ability to
Mm.
I think a bit of my sort of determination. And I think therefore I didn't have to worry that much from the
Mm.
point of view. I mean, there were challenging times. I mean, there were times when he was a little boy, and I remember one project he wanted to do was build a house, and it had to be in the school the next morning.
Mm.
And and he just wasn't happy. He's such a perfectionist, wasn't happy with the house, and he wouldn't let me sleep. And he said, no, I want you to make those curtains for these windows. And this is 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, if the social services find out, they're going to take my child away. What am I doing keeping this child up until night? He would not sleep. He refused to sleep that night till he finished his house. And this was 2 in the morning. And I remember telling you about this, and you said, I would have just switched off the light and gone to bed.
I really would have. I would be like, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to sleep. You do whatever the hell you want to. I'm going to sleep. See, that's the difference, you see. That's the difference. I think mothers in that way, they're just extraordinary creatures.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us who've not really gone through it understand. What is it, Mina?
Yeah, I think there is a sort of very natural, you're absolutely compelled
Mm.
to want to achieve that for your child as much as you want for yourself. And I think that there's something very, I think it's just a natural. I mean, when you look at, even if you look at different worlds, if you look at like the animal world or whatever, you see the instinctiveness of wanting to build that nest, wanting you see fledglings trying to survive in a nest. And I
Mm.
think that is very common even in the minutia, our humanity. The
Mhm.
fact that in mankind we still have that compulsion
Mm.
to survive and to strive. And I think it's that striving is the main thing that causes us to want to see the end product. We want to see that child surviving. And I
Mhm.
think it's so instinctual that you don't even notice it. And it's so biological and physiological within you, you don't notice it at all. You're just driven by it. And you find when you look at a lot of mothers, I don't think there's any mother who would say she's not driven to see her child being protected and
Absolutely.
supported. Mm.
Absolutely. Something that I always tell our regular meditators is, or time to time, I remind them, if they had the amount of conviction that they had towards being a mother, towards the practice, the same amount of conviction that they had towards being a mother, and they had the same amount towards their practice, they would all be enlightened. We would all be enlightened, you know. And earlier today, because you went into sort of that instinct of protection, right? How do we, or how does a mother, because sometimes it becomes a bit overbearing and overwhelming, to a child.
Mm.
This aspect of protection, it gets very annoying. you know, how was it for you to sort of have a sense of balance? And before we go into that, I should also remind that we both understand, and I think we agree on the fact that mothers have different techniques. There is no right and wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think every mother is unique. and that it's her unique qualities that she brings to the world. And no mother is right or wrong. And I think that that has to be acknowledged. And every mother has to be accepted unconditionally for what she is as a human being and the contribution she makes, because everyone has a different style. And that style, in fact, you can share and learn from it and improve yourself in the way that you approach certain issues and problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can actually just, think, well, I'm the best, because you're not. You far from it. You're not the best. In fact, you're quite weak, actually. And so when you have that lack of, I'm not quite good at this, or I'm not quite right with this, or I'm not, and that's really good, because it makes you a better mother. When I remember doing child psychology, and I thought I knew it all, did I? Started child psychology when my son was only 4 years old, and I think it was the best thing I did, because I remember the lecturer, the first thing she put on the board was that the mother's love is infinite. She said, never ever forget that a mother's love is infinite, and that infinite love transcends over time. So
Yeah.
she's not just talking about love being in this lifetime, but she's talking about the whole samsaric journey, and then repeating that again in a future lifetime, and that it's so infinite that you and I can never really, with our human condition, I don't think we can contemplate just how infinite that relationship is.
Mm-hmm. So the Buddha relates to mother's love as also a type of love that is never a hindrance to the path of nibbana.
Mm,
But any other type of love, any other type of attraction, the Buddha classes in the categories of raga or tanha,
mm,
attachment,
yeah,
right? Because of that sort of form of unconditional love,
yeah.
unconditional love. What made you go into child psychology? Was it to help your part as a parent, or was it career?
No, not at all. In fact, I was doing night duty. I was working as a midwife, and
Mm,
I wouldn't go to bed. I would take my child with me for child psychology without having had any sleep the whole night.
mm,
And I would literally, take him with me, put him in a creche, and I would do this child psychology course. But
mm,
I'm so glad I did, because it built a foundation. It made me more aware of
mm,
stuff like, don't be so dictatorial. And because I was a young woman, I just wanted him to do as I told him to do, But then when you're doing some of the coverage of
mm,
different milestones a child reaches, you suddenly realize, actually, I've got to be sensitive to this. I can't, I can't raise my voice. I can't tell him this. And so it makes you a little bit more self-conscious, and therefore you're able to make the decisions in a much more wholesome way.
mm,
And I mean, I personally think it would be really good if more young mothers were able to undertake some level of psychology to support their children, because child rearing is hard enough without sort of not having an understanding of where your reference points are and
mm,
where your boundaries start and where they finish. Yeah.
mm. With regards to boundaries, you know, with regards to boundaries, how did you set your boundaries for your child? What are these boundaries?
um I think my son would say to me, you were a strict mum, you know but then on the other hand, I think it's really important that as parents, you are not a child's friend. Of course,
Mm,
you're friendly to your child, you want acceptance, and
yeah.
you want the child to love you. But actually, ultimately, the child needs guidance. You know,
Mm,
they need, every child needs a parent. A child doesn't need a little friend who's saying, oh, well, I'm going to, sit and have a party with you. Yes, you can have a party with, but the child has to realize you're not a peer, you're the guardian.
mhm,
Because you have to set the boundaries as to their well-being. They don't know how to, they're about their well-being, but you
mm,
know about their well-being, because you know how to protect them. And
mm,
so I think sometimes parents feel, to be a good parent, you've got to interact with your child like a peer. I
mm,
don't think it works in every circumstances. I think it actually can be quite detrimental.
mm,
And when I've heard of, like, uh, like the other day, there was somebody had made a comment around a father smoking cannabis with his son, and I was like completely shocked, and I thought that's completely out of boundaries. That father needs to make sure that he doesn't, take drugs with his child. I mean, what's all that about? And so, it's his inner child, the father's inner child, meeting the inner child of the son, and there's no guidance there. No wonder that that poor boy is addicted to drugs. So I do think it's really important to ensure that the child understands that you are the parent, and you are going to guide that child. You're guiding the child not in a dictatorial manner, but in a way that's going to protect his future interests and benefits.
Because I think we need to go a little bit more deep into this, Mina, because I know for sure that this is a problem that a lot of parents living in the West, in Europe, in America, different out of Sri Lanka in the West, this is something that they are bothered by a lot. That how do I protect my child from drugs, alcohol, and addiction? And I know that you've worked extensively with alcohol, um, not selling it, but 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 developing project plans to sort of protect people from it. How do you think? I mean, you have a culture that springs from, you're Indian. You have your roots in Indian culture. Rearing a child, bringing a child up in a private school. What are your suggestions on how parents could sort of impart?
I mean, I remember an occasion where I had to go for a play in this independent school. And I'm not going to mention the school in case people think, oh my God, never send your child to an independent school. But basically, this particular school, it wasn't the school's fault, actually. It was the processes on that evening. And I think what the porters did was they parked these wine bottles at the back of the stage. So I'm thinking that it's safe there, because in this particular school you have what's known as an interval. So you have a drama class, a drama, whoever's performing and everything. And in the middle of the drama, there's an interval, and parents go and meet with each other and have a glass of wine. And I noticed at the second part of the drama, the children were quite tipsy, and I thought, this is really odd. I mean, they look really red, and this, it was just obvious that there was something not quite right.
A little bit too happy.
A bit too happy, yeah. And subsequently realized that they had stolen this wine bottle from where the porters had stocked it, and they were actually drinking behind the stage. Now, that is a dismissible offense for the teacher, because the teacher should have seen that, but obviously he didn't know. And so this came out, and I found out, and then suddenly I was like, what am I going to do? And it was quite shocking at that time, because and I thought, well, if I tell the headmaster, this poor teacher, who's a fantastic teacher, is going to be dismissed, because that's the policy in the school. You get dismissed immediately for anything like that. And I remember I tried to take a very compassionate view about this, even though I was angry inside. I felt really angered by how can you allow children to drink alcohol? And I remember eventually I just calmed myself down. I thought, no, I've just got to let this pass and see what happens. And so when in my job remit, that came up, about alcohol. So yeah, I did a lot of work around alcohol prevention in every space, in every aspect of alcohol prevention you can think of. I worked with the police, I worked with the London ambulances, I worked with accident and emergencies, I worked with doctors, I worked with everyone, schools, everything, just to make sure that alcohol was an agenda. And that also gave rise to local legislation where alcohol areas, you couldn't drink in certain areas, alcohol zones, prohibition zones were introduced. Now, people would say, how can I be so, judgmental? But it wasn't about being judgmental. It was about the fact that I wanted to make sure that these type of incidents don't happen. Because if children learn that it's okay to drink alcohol, they will start a journey of alcohol abuse. And particularly when there's problems in their lives, they're not able to cope with it, and they'll immediately take the alcohol bottle. And there's a very good saying about this. A person takes a drink, the drink takes the drink, and then eventually the drink takes the person. So
Mm,
that's the scenario we are talking about here. So it's really important as parents that we check on our kids, we make sure that they're not influenced by the idea that, because the imagery on television and everywhere, it's all about alcohol being a great thing, when in fact it's the worst thing. And it is, and I think that it's so important that we instill that sort of understanding that, look, this is a downward spiral, and if you don't instill those ideas at an early age, you're going to have problems later on in life.
mm. That can be quite a challenging task when alcohol is like it's very much a part of British culture, isn't it? Where you go to the pub after work and you chat and you network with with a pint of beer. That's very much a part of British culture almost on how you network. How could a parent be there for a child? Because I remember I was exposed to alcohol. I mean, I wouldn't want to use the word exposed because I was brought up in a Catholic background. We had, alcohol was served at the dinner table, to us since the age of, about 13, 14.
Mm,
Right. And something that I'm quite happy about is to know that, none of my immediate family that I keep in touch with, none of them abuse alcohol, because alcohol is not something that is new to them. Alcohol is not something which is special to them. Alcohol has been served to them since they were young. This sort of, how could a parent be there? Because obviously we are not going to be able to 100% stop our kids from drinking alcohol.
yeah, absolutely. And you're completely right. I think, the idea that alcohol is in most people's homes. They have wine at lunchtime, or,
Mm,
or drink a glass of wine. But the problem is that it's very important to realize that, yes, you can have alcohol, but actually the whole aspect of your relationship with alcohol needs to be discussed in a transparent way within
mm,
the home. And if that isn't discussed openly, you're quite right. The child feels, oh, I've been forbidden. And it's the forbidden fruit that they want. It's usually the people who not have been exposed to alcohol are more likely to abuse it later on. So in a
mm,
way, I'm not saying no, don't show them an alcohol bottle. All I'm saying is that, yes, in French households, for example, they always have wine at lunchtime with their bread, and and you don't find an issue with alcohol abuse later on in life, because they know that alcohol is just, in fact, many Europeans think that the British have an odd relationship with alcohol. And so I think there is a sense, I agree with you, that of exposure, but controlled exposure, and also transparency in what it actually can entail. And
mm,
if that type of awareness is instilled at an early age, you're going to have children going out because they're feeling that it's the forbidden fruit. We
mm.
go out and actually abuse it, because what's forbidden is what you most resist is what persists, unfortunately.
Absolutely. A trick that my father used to use is he only served the very cheap wine to the kids so that they don't want to drink. We only got to know about this later on. They drank the good stuff, you know. All right. Mina, when it comes to parenting, when it comes to rearing a child, the conversation about unconditional love is something that arises throughout. The power and the extent of effect that unconditional love leaves on a child is rather, it's like a protective barrier almost, that Maya Angelou says it's a protective barrier that lies on the skin of that being since till the being's death.
Mm.
What do you have to say about this?
Unconditional love, and unconditional acceptance. It's really important, and I think people would think I'm absolutely mad, because I'm going to actually tell you a story of what happened. I was I was in London with my little boy at the time, and he wanted this particular meal, you know. And I looked at the restaurant, and we were walking through it, and he said, "Oh, look at this! Look at the amount of stuff they have in this like food hall, and it's all, and it's a very posh people eating on the side and everything. I want that meal," he said. And I looked at the price, and I thought, "Oh my God, I can't afford that." And it was something like, it was £24 a plate. And I
Mm.
thought, I could see the disappointment when, and I thought, no. I looked in my bank balance, I only had £24. So I just took the £24, totally irresponsible mother, this is, took the £24 and just gave him that meal. And it meant so much to him. And it meant more to me that he was enjoying this meal that he wanted. And when I looked back, and I think to myself, gosh, no, I don't think many people would have done that, knowing that there's hardly any money in the bank. And, but I did it because I knew that for him, psychologically, that meant so much to him. And so I did it. And that is about unconditional love, it's about acceptance. And yes, it means taking those risks as a
Mm.
parent. But those risks are the very risks that actually later on you find that the child will eventually, I mean, my son then eventually, when he was very successful in his career, he was able to take me to all the expensive restaurants. And when I look at the bill and it's like £500 for a meal, and I'm thinking, my God, how can you pay so much for a meal? It's obscene. But he said, "Don't worry, Mom, that's for you." And I just think, and I looked back at the time when I couldn't even afford that, that meal, and I had only £24. But when I look back and I think of what I have gained now, that, there is none of this, you can't, Mom has to have the best, and that's how, because I wanted the best for him, and they grow up wanting the best for their mother. And I think that is, for me, is an example of unconditional love.
Mm. Mm. Well, okay. I'm touched by that story because whenever my mom didn't really come to pick me up from school, but whenever that she did, I used to get all the boys from my class and take them to the cafeteria. And I'm like, lunch is on me. And then because it was a treat for me for my mother to come pick me up from school, so my mother sort of endured and sort of, because for me, she wanted to get back home to start work again. And just the things that mothers often do. You being a grown woman now, having a son who is in his 30s, when you look back at your childhood, what do you think?
um I mean, I think he has done me very proud, from the point of view that, it's a very English thing to say, he has done me proud, but it's a very English term. But actually, he's my son is now actually a barrister,
Mm.
and I never expected him to reach such heights of academic achievement. I never expected that. So
Mm.
I was just a very simple mom wanting to just succeed in life, and be able to pay the mortgage off and things like that. And so he overstated the boundaries of his achievements. I couldn't. I think the fact that my greatest moment as was he was called to the bar. And I remember going to the bar, to this very prestigious place, and everybody was like, I was just amazed. And then when he was called to the bar, and they rolled out all his qualifications and his distinctions and all the exhibitions and all the rest he achieved. I think at the end, when I went to congratulate him, I just broke down and cried. I just couldn't believe what
Mm.
a long, hard journey I had. And it was only when I saw that, how incredibly, emotional that moment was for me, because I hadn't, he overachieved his boundaries of what I expected. And I think that is again part of the upbringing we have. Whereas when I look when I juxtapose that with my mother's upbringing, my mother was a very wise, simple woman.
Mm,
Um, and I think that when your mother is a very simple, very, very wise person, she's not going to have those sort of, ambitions for you.
mm,
Um, and I think that not having those ambitions for you, it doesn't mean that she was a bad mother, but she's going to experience the love she's going to give you is through her part of her socialization of her early childhood. So
mm,
I think the continuity from generation to generation is about the early socialization experiences and
mm,
how we project that in our child rearing later on.
mm. It's funny that you must say that because within Asian cultures, we see a lot of comparison happening, you know, where we are compared, our qualifications, our achievements are compared to other children, to other families. Um, what do you think about this? Is this a good thing?
Sorry, repeat that again.
What I meant was, being a part of Asian culture, I'm not sure whether this happens in English culture. We are compared, children are compared, often that is a tactic that mothers would use to sort of,
Yeah,
push their children, right? What do you think about that?
it's very sad because I remember being at school and there was a doctor. He was very, very, he was obviously a very eminent surgeon,
Mm,
and he would look at his son and he would constantly say, "Well, look," he would point to my son and say, "Look at him, he can do it, why can't you?" And that used to upset me, not so much because that he was comparing his son to my son, but the fact
mm,
that the effect that had on his child, what I could see the child was really upset because
mm,
the father was comparing. And I think it's really important that people realize that every child comes with their own unique attributes and
mm,
qualities. And I think it's really sad when parents compare their child, because there's no comparison in this.
mm,
And it isn't about your child achieving more than another child.
mm,
I mean, when my son came to me and he said, "Mom, I don't know what to do for my career," and I said, "Whatever you like, be an actor, painter, whatever you want to do." I did not expect him to go into law, but in
mm,
fact he did, and he did very well. But
mm,
what I'm saying is where parents make comparisons, where they have high expectations, where they, their own their own uh, aspiration takes over, then the child doesn't develop his or her own talent,
mm,
because the parent is living their life through that child, and that's not right. And the same with comparisons. That's why I get very sad when I see parents compare their children to each other, because every child is so unique.
mm. Okay. Indumati, you have something to add. You may just unmute your mic and speak your truth. um, there you go, Indumati. If you would just unmute yourself. There you go.
Now I'm on you.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I would like to say, and well, I'm also actually a proud grandma. And for me to have achieved that is only because of my children. I couldn't have done that without my children. So I have this great love for people. And I'm a people person also. And I originally came from Sri Lanka and now I'm living in England. And I still adore that happens in Sri Lanka. And I really care for people there too, because my mother is still alive. And my mother and my mother and the grandmothers and everybody down the generation are typical Buddhist. Even though they were typical Buddhist and they did not push no one, everybody was given the opportunity to do what they like. This
Mm,
is why I love that, because
mm,
they were giving me the opportunity to do what I like and
mm,
do anything that I desire to do.
mm,
So that has driven me to what I am now.
mm,
And that's exactly what I like to mimic to my children. Also to do what they prefer,
mm,
not push or not compare, because I don't compare that, because they are all different. As you said, they are unique and unique human beings. They have different qualities, different social skills, different everything. So, which is very important. And even for my grandchildren, I don't do that, because I think even the grandchildren, when it comes to this, is my third line in this country, and when it comes to the third line, I still do the same to them. All I could do is offer my love, my love that takes a long way. We may not see each other for months and years, but still that love is there, eternal love, kind of eternal love, right? And this is what we have to practice, I suppose, because love is great, not hate. And if you have hate in somebody, you're only going to kill yourself in the hate. And I would love to promote love. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Indumati. Thank you. We love your energy. Thank you. I was thinking about this, Meena, and actually quite today I was reminded of it because we were doing the Mother's Day session, and we had another session earlier, and all these other mothers, my sort of other mothers were sort of sending me text messages and all of that, and I was thinking, I was taken aback to the time that I was struggling to become a monk. And obviously my parents were doing all that they could possibly do to not, for me to not have me become a monk. And I remember it got so bad at home that the security used to sort of pat me down because my phones were taken away, my cards were taken away, cash was not given to my hand. Because what I used to do, I was really bad. I used to go to school, and the school trusted me so much I could walk out of the school anytime and they would not question me because I was the Buddhist. You know what I mean? And so I used to do this. I used to walk out of school and I used to go to forest. I used to go see forest monks, and this is what I was doing. And so my parents took all my cards and cash and all of that away, phones and everything. And I remember thinking, okay, so they were trying to do everything that they possibly could to stop me becoming a monk. And I remember thinking to myself, how could they actually stop me becoming a monk? Right? Just thinking to myself. And the only thing that they possibly could have done to stop me being a monk is to support my practice, which they didn't. That made me become a monk because I was a rebel. If my mother had supported me, I wouldn't have become a monk.
Amazing, isn't it?
And the way things work, and years, a little bit wiser than that stupid child now, and having so many other mothers now, this sense of support that you could give your child, even with alcohol, drugs, whatever that a child does, a parent should always stick behind the child, I feel like, and to make sure to entrust on the fact that I love you and I ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had many experiences like that. I was angry with my child, but yet you need to be able to support them through their fines or whatever, even to the transport, because they get a ban. Okay, now of course a criminal ban, but they get a ban, and if they get a ban, they're not allowed to go nowhere. Of course, then you have to take them to colleges and things like that, so they can't proceed on their higher education. Yes, you need to be behind them. Yes, if you were not behind them, they'll find somebody else to take them. So that way you're losing your child.
Sure. Thank you, Indumati. Now, how does a mother, Meena, I would like you to now bring in a bit of your psychology. How does a mother, because kids do, and there are so many dangers in the world now, how does a mother prepare herself to have that amount of support for a child mentally? Because it is a task, you are fearful because this is your baby. How does my mother sort of prep herself to have that kind of support to the child, for the child?
It is hard. It is hard because I think that it is about self-reflection, and it's about having that space where you know you have to decide what your priorities are.
Mm.
Your priority is about, you know, only money, then you're going to just be anxious about money. But if your priority is the welfare of that child, even if the child is the most deviant, the most horrendously difficult, misbehaved, I think if you give unconditional love to the point where you are willing to give your life up for that child,
Mm.
that's, for me, it's very much a type of, for me personally, I mean, I'm not advocating this to everyone else, but I'm just saying for me personally, I was prepared to lay down my life for my son. You know, it was that strong, that bond, that I just didn't want anything or any harm to come to him. And
Mm.
I, that type of, you know, you have to also understand that you don't want to be so protectionist that you come to a point where the child feels afraid, they
Mm.
become risk averse. So you've got to really like be able to have that, you know, that not too extreme, and not too lenient either, but just to be able to follow a path where, you know, you know that this is the best way is the middle way, is
Mhm.
balance.
Mhm. If anyone wants to ask anything or even add their suggestions into the conversation discussion that we are having, you are most welcome to do so. So if you just use a raise hand option, I will sort of unmute you and you will be able to sort of add anything that you would like to add into the mix of the conversation, and you're most welcome to do so. Acknowledging that these are your observations and your experiences in your path of being a mother. Yes, Neha, of course. Hold on, let me. Yes.
Hi, Mina. Thank you so much. It was so informative. And, a lot of what you said sort of rang true for me because I carry all those emotions, the guilt, and, all of that as a mum. But as you rightly said, I think for me, communication is one thing. I mean, they're still fairly young, so they communicate, but I'm sure there'll be a time they'll have secrets and all of that. So I do want to make sure that they always feel that, when they come to either myself or my husband, they're in a safe environment and they can share everything with us. But my question to you, as your son perhaps was a teenager, you know um, what tips can you share with us so that, even though I'm sure I remind them that, it's a safe place with us, once they grow, they're gonna probably want to hide certain things from us and not confide
Um,
in us. So if you could share certain tips.
yeah, of course, of course. I mean, I know that when my son was a teenager, I thought he was a complete rebel. He wanted to do his own thing, and I despaired. I actually despaired. I thought I'm never going to get this boy on track, and I know what it feels like. You're completely out of control. And then I realized, as I was talking to a number of people, and I was fortunate because I was with amongst the medical field. I worked alongside many doctors, and I realized that and also I started talking to some of the psychologists in my department as well. And then I realized actually it's so important that when they're teenagers, you actually let them free. You don't try to constrain them because you want to protectionism. You want this whole idea of, I want to protect my child. But the problem is that the child needs to find their own identity, their own individuality. And the more you try to protect them, the further they go from you. They rebel because then they know that, hold on, I'm not, I want to find my own individuality here. And remember, we are living in a Western world where they are going to compare themselves to their peers.
Mm.
And they're going to say, hold on, so and so had so much more freedom than I do. So it is about letting go. And we know from our Buddhist philosophy that in a way, as much as you want to hold on to your child, you really have to say, I have to let go here. This is a teenager who, if I don't let go, he's going to become a complete dropout in society. And I don't want that. So you have to give that individuality to that child. You could give that permission to say, yeah, okay, you can be an individual, but you know what? I'm always here for you, darling. You know, I'm giving you unconditional love, and I'll always be here for you. And that sense of, they know that, yes, they can pursue their individuality, but they can also have access to you should they get into difficulties. And that is built upon trust. And it takes time, because I remember as a teenager, I thought, when he was a teenager, I just thought, I can't hack this. You know, this is just too difficult. You know, but you do. Eventually, you find out. I was just fortunate. I was amongst a very good, team of psychologists and GPs who worked beside me. So I was able to have tea and conversations with them, and I think I learned quite a lot, from seeing how other families reacted. And the more protectionist you become, that I'm going to protect my child, you actually constrain their ability to find their own identity.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I just have to, I guess, in some ways, hope that they have the right set of peers that they hang out with.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mina.
You're most welcome.
I think Neha, I think that question that you asked, it resonates with me entirely, because my mother was an absolute control freak who controlled each and every person in my life. Right? Absolutely. I was not, it was crazy. It was crazy. She micromanaged each and everything. I would only be wasn't allowed to play with the kids down the road. I was only able to associate. And yes, that made me rebel more. That made me sort of, so when, yes, for example, like this very petty stuff, like me and my brother really wanted to go in the bus. And now you're like thinking, why did we even,
Yeah.
But it was the fact of that control and coming free of that. I think there must be some amount of trust that you sort of give them to make their decisions and support them, And thank you, Neha, for bringing that up. Thank you. Anyone else who would like to sort of add into the mix? Devika, I can see you sort of trying to say something over there. Yes, we can hear you now, Devika.
Okay, I just want to add that the children as they grow up, they expect you to trust them. And like Mina said, you have to give a certain amount of trust when even she, our only child. And we had to send her for her studies all alone. So we had to give that. We loved her so much. And, because she being the only child. And it was difficult at first, thinking, don't know how she will manage. But she had a friend in the school that we sent her to. And we gave her the trust, and we told her that she needs to take care of herself and, and also value our love and do what is right if she loves us. That was the only thing we said. So she came and she did well. And up to now, I mean, she's very independent, but she knows that we love her so much. And she loves us too. So she did good, she didn't get involved in any, other things, what happens when you're in a graduate school in a different country. So I think that's the way you have to trust them and give them the love you have as a mother and a father. That's my little bit. You have to trust them, and set them free when they come to a certain age. So when they know you love them so much, they dare not do anything bad.
Sure. And I know that Devika does love her child very much, because she was just cooking in the upper for her just the other day when I was calling her. Lovely, Devika. Thank you so much. I think, Mina, it is common ground that we all accept that a mother never stops loving a child.
Yes.
However or whatever that happens, a mother will endure to love a child as much as they can. Rushika, would you like to add something, Rushika?
Hi, yeah, I thought
Hi.
I'll drop in as the daughter rather than, well, I'm not a mother yet myself.
Well, you do have a dog.
Yeah, I'm a dog bum. But no, I thought as a daughter, I mean, growing up as a teenager as well, and then going into university, as well as trust I received from my mum, I thought honesty was definitely very important between the two of us, because I knew, especially when I was in high school, my mum took the time to listen to my stories about my friends. So she knew who my friends were. She knew their names. She may have met them. And if I had a fight with a friend, she knew about it. And that kind of honesty then led on to, when I am going out by myself, I'm not going to lie to her about where I'm going. I'm going to tell her, yeah, I'm going to stay at this friend's house. And she already knew about that friend enough to trust me to go and stay there. So it made life a lot easier to just carry on. And when I go to university, she already knows this is what I'm like. This is where I go. These are the people I'm hanging out with. And at the same time, including, you were talking about drinking earlier as well. She was always very better to drink in front of me, and I know what I'm drinking. She knows what I'm drinking if I do. And that way, when I got to university, I had a lot of friends who were really restricted and they went mental when they had the freedom. And I wasn't one of them, to be honest, because I'd already knew how much I could drink or what I could drink. And so I could really enjoy it. And I thought that would be a good perspective. Honesty was a real good one.
Thank you, Rushika. Thank you. And your mother's lovely. She's lovely to me as well. Mina, something that before we because it is already 8 o'clock and we were both the black sheep of the house. Is that a can of worms that we can dive into?
Well, I'm not afraid to say it now on reflection, but yes, when I was a teenager, I was worse than my son. Yeah, I wasn't going to put up with any of this nonsense about a proposal and a marriage and all of that. I said, no, I'm going. And I just literally left, and it upset my parents so much, and to this day I still grieve at how much I must have upset them. Yes, we reunited after I finished my course, my degree, and all the rest of it. And and I think they were upset because they couldn't accept the fact that why did you sort of not accept this proposal? I mean, what's so good about a career? But I think it was again a different period. I mean, they were brought up in their 40s, 1940s. I was not going to identify with that level of of the way they felt children should be. They were designated a certain role, and I just didn't fit into that role of what they expected of me. And I think that for me, obviously, it caused a lot of havoc in the family. And I take responsibility for that. But I knew that if I'd stayed on, that I would probably have had huge problems psychologically. And I knew that for my own, psychological welfare, I had to leave. And this caused huge repercussions because, when you live in a society where, family is everything about reputation, and then suddenly
and Indian heritage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and somebody wrote an article about me in the newspaper, and my parents read it, and they were really upset because, news had got round that I'd left the home. And, as a young girl, you do not leave your parental home. And all these things happened. But I think eventually it was a funny thing was I can still remember one day we were all invited for lunch. This was much later on after my parents had forgiven me. And I was invited for lunch, and we were about to have lunch. And my mother said to everybody, she said, I am so proud of Mina. She is the best midwife you can ever imagine. And she said, and I was like, this is a woman who didn't want me to study. I used to study my A levels under the bed. I wasn't allowed to study because the proposal was waiting for me,
Yeah, and my mother does the same. She takes credit for me becoming a monk. Well, I'm staring her down, and I'm like, woman, no. No, but I think the fact that um now being working with people and sort of doing all of that, I do see a lot of my mother in me, you know. I do see a lot of my mother in me, and I think through self-reflection, I now understand bits and parts of my mother through me, you know, in a way that I understand why she made the decisions that she made. I understand why she was mad. I understand the fact of, whatever it is that she did in the way that she did it. And I think something that my mother always used to do is she was very vocal about how much she loved the both of us, me and my brother, which was very cheesy and annoying, actually. Very cheesy and very annoying. But I know, for example, with my brother, it has really paid off. And whilst I'm sort of globe-trotting and all over, my brother is the one who's sort of taking care and sort of with my mother. And I feel that that is the result of my mother being vocal about the love that she has for her child or children, right? So, Mina, we are out of time now. It was a lovely conversation. Maybe we could continue. Actually, we thought of going into different sort of aspects, but we just got entangled in conversation and we went into others. Maybe we can have another sort of a session because. And the final question that I'm going to ask you, Mina, is if you were able to, I mean, give a piece of advice to your younger self, right? To you in university, dragging or sort of carrying your child to classes, to that younger self, right? Going through all of that havoc and not knowing where things are going. What is that piece of advice that would be, that one piece of advice that would be?
I think it's about self-acceptance and your own personal validation that you're okay. You're going to be all right. And I think more women need to do that, especially on Mother's Day. You will be all right, and have that trust in yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Mina. And
Thank you for inviting me.
thank you everyone else for joining in to this discussion. It was rather very, very casual, but I thought that this session must be something which is relaxed, because I think that is the best aspect of motherhood, being relaxed, being able to relax with a mother. And I think for me, Amali, the sponsor of our earlier session, was just texting me in the morning, and she was like, Bante, thank you so much for thinking about mothers. And I was like, of course, mothers are the most important people in the planet, right? and I think as a monk, and being somewhat weird as a monk in a way that, I think probably the background or whatever it is, I think thinking back, the reason that I haven't disrobed and sort of gone back home when my mother is still sort of welcome, sort of with hands wide open, come my son, that kind of an attitude. What has kept me going through all of those difficulties have always been the mothers, the women. Not, we don't care about the men, the women. The aunties, the mothers who've been with me. I remember when my parents thought, if we cut him off financially when I was in Burma, if we cut him off financially, he's not going to be able to afford the nice things that he likes to afford. So he'll come running back to us. So they canceled my cards. I was, dirt poor. For the first time in my life, a card declined. And I was in Burma and I couldn't afford anything. And I remember, there was this sort of lady who was this sort of very sort of cuddly mother, really, quite much like most of the mothers here. And I remember she kind of adopted me and took care of me and supported me. And up to this date, she's like, when she calls me, she's not like, how are you, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? Are you studying? Are you doing good? I hope you're not wasting your time. And it has always been people like this. And I'm so blessed that, like you, Mina, sometimes when I'm having a bad day or when things are not going wrong, I call Mina and I'm like, Mina, Mina, I need some comfort. and I'm so blessed to have a lot of mothers now. And I think who I am, or being, I don't know, I'm not sort of gloating on myself, but these ladies call me and they're like, Bhante, please call us your mother. I think that person, or I've been made that person by my mother, because she was so expressive and she was so open about her love and she was so passionate about what she had to do. And and this whole thing. So I think mothers are the most important beings on the planet. Right. And I think it's so important that we realize that and we never forget that. Mina, are you going to back me up? You better.
Indeed, I am indeed. In fact, I was going to suggest that the Mangala Sutra talks about this so well when Lord Buddha says, respect your parents, and the mother, features very much in that. And we forget those blessings, because he's actually advising the blessings, because the deities are asking him, what are the highest blessings? And he's saying the love of a mother. So we mustn't forget that, Lord Buddha has outlined that for us very, very much. And we have to respect that so much and appreciate it and have gratitude for that.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here and supporting the program. Neha, you want to say something really quick?
Oh, no.
No,
I
okay.
want to thank both of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone for, I'm sure most of you are quite tired. So thank you very much for coming in and supporting. Mina, thank you so much for coming, for accepting my invitation. I hope maybe we could have like a mother's forum, a ladies' mother's forum, where we sort of discuss and maybe kind of like also drag our children down, you know what I mean? A Dhamma forum where we drag our children down. Won't that be just incredible? So thank you so much. And I hope we can keep this conversation going around parenting, around sort of motherhood, because I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I wish all of you a very good rest of the evening. And I will see you all very soon. Take care.